A knowledge of the identification of range plants is important to ranchers, farmers, and various field technicians. The goal of this program is to provide students and teachers with an intensive knowledge of the identification and evaluation of range plants. Close-up views of 17 different species of grass will be provided to aid you in recognizing important identifying characteristics. Under field conditions, the key identification traits of each plant will be discussed by Mr. Billy Bob McMullen, former coach of the Snyder, Texas FFA National Champion Range and Pasture Judging Team, and Mr. Ernie Eckert, coach of the Comfort, Texas FFA State Champion Range and Pasture Judging Team. After the discussion, a graphic of each plant, including length of life, season of growth, origin, grazing value, and reaction to abuse, will be presented.
This plant is annual threeawn. Annual threeawn is annual, warm, native, invader, and poor. Annual threeawn can be easiest identified by the branching at the nodes. As you'll notice on this plant, annual threeawn, where on your nodes it branches and it will form two distinct, different stem sections. We're showing an old stem from last year, and we have a new growth from this year, and you are beginning to see where the stems are starting to divide right in here. The second item used to identify annual threeawn is it will develop a threeawn seed head, which is very similar to that of perennial threeawn, and here is the beginning of your threeawn seed head. Annual threeawn usually does not have near as much foliage as does perennial threeawn, and it's not as upright and is in a bunch grass like perennial threeawn is.
Annual threeawn, Aristida species. Annual, warm season, native, poor, invader.
The next plant we have is Bermuda grass. Bermuda grass is a perennial, warm, introduced grass which makes it an invader and good grazing. Bermuda grass can be easily identified by its windmill type seed head that usually has 4 or 5 sections. Bermuda grass is a short sod grass, or sometimes used as a turf grass, and we have several different varieties. This one shown here is your common Bermuda, but you may also be able to use coastal Bermuda or some of our other improved species. Another distinguishing characteristic of Bermuda grass is that it spreads by runners, and roots will begin growing at the nodes, and more foliage will start growing from the node and a new plant will erupt. The nodes and the inner nodes on Bermuda grass are free from hair, they're slick, and they're usually from 1 to 3 inches in length with an average of 2 inches.
Bermuda grass, Cynodon dactylon. Perennial, warm season, introduced, good, invader.
Here we have big bluestem. You'll notice the color is a little bit different than what we had talked about on switchgrass. It's got more of a blue-green color to it. And when we talked about the switchgrass having the hair or fuzz on the inside of the leaf, not so on big bluestem. The plant looks a whole lot like, but now our fuzz, instead of being on the leaf, is on the sheath. It goes from the sheath down toward the ground, and it's fuzzy all the way around the sheath, if you'll notice. If you can see that, at the base of the sheath, or right here at the base of the leaf, going down the sheath. And of course, if you're able to get a fluorescence, it has what I call a turkey foot seed head. It'll fork at the top. You spread your fingers out, if you'll notice, and each seed has an awn, a twisted awn on it. This is from the old growth, of course. You may have it that way and you may not, but the way I go ahead and do it is the blue-green color and the fuzz all up and down the sheath of the stem.
Big bluestem, Andropogon gerardi. Perennial, warm season. Native, good, decreaser.
Here we have a clump grass called blue grama, and usually the seed, I don't know, some people say they look like a rooster comb. As they mature, they will curl more. And if you'll notice, there's usually two racemes or two seed heads coming off each stalk. You notice here's one and here's one. That's about all. Each stem will probably have two, which is a little different from some of the other grasses. And there's several compact seed that are on the rachius. The rachius is what holds each seed. There's several seed, and they go all the way at the end of the rachius. Now, hairy grama will look just about like this, except that the seed will stop before they get to the end of the rachius and leave a stinger, point, or whatever you prefer to call it. I call it a stinger. Some people just call it a sticker or a point. But blue grama, the seed will go all the way at the end of the rachius. On hairy grama, the seed will stop probably 1/4 of an inch before it gets to the end of the rachius. And also, if you'll look, it's hard to see, but you can go down into the plant, and where the leaf and the sheath come together, you see a little minute, sparsely a ring of hair. It's hard to see, but it's there, which will not be on hairy grama. Now, hairy grama, if you're going to compare it, will have what we call ciliated hairs on the leaf margins. Blue grama does not have any ciliation whatsoever. I think we forgot to mention it's perennial, warm season, native, a increaser, and it's good. Perennial, warm season, native, increaser, and good. So remember that you have two racemes or seed heads to each stem. You have no stinger or no rachius on blue grama like you would on hairy grama, and no ciliation on the leaf margins like you would have on hairy grama.
Blue grama, Botuloa gracilis. Perennial, warm season, native, good, increaser.
The next plant we have is Broomsedge bluestem. Broomsedge bluestem is perennial, warm, native. It's an invader, and it's poor grazing. Broomsedge bluestem can be identified by several characteristics. The first being the seed head. Seed head resembles that somewhat of little bluestem. The second factor used in identifying Broomsedge bluestem is the leaves. As you can see, it's a tall bunch grass, therefore the leaves are relatively long and large. And the leaves will have prominent hairs as found on big bluestem on the leaf margins. And the third factor I used in identifying broomsedge bluestem is the base. The base is very flat, quite coarse, and will have hair on the bottom parts of the leaves.
Broomsedge bluestem, Andropogon virginicus. Perennial, warm season. Native, poor, invader.
Here we have a sod farming grass, which is called buffalo grass. It's perennial, warm season, native, an increaser, and good. Now we're looking at the male plant right here because it forms these little spikelets, I call them flags, that produce the pollen. They grow probably 4 to 6 inches above the ground. Now, it's a dioecious plant, which means male and female are separate plants. But here we're looking at the male plant. It's got the little pollen producing flags on it. It also produces the seed, which are close to the ground, and I think we can, if you look real close, right down here, you can see closer to the ground, a little burr-like seed. They've got little sharp points, little burrs on them, and these are the buffalo seed. It also produces stolons or runners. I think you can see those here. We've picked those up. We'll just pull one over here that's close to these seed. You see how they form these runners? And at every node, it shoots out a new growth, and it'll take root at every node and shoot out new growth.
Buffalo grass, Buckloi dactyloides. Perennial, warm season, native, good, increaser.
The next plant we have is curly mesquite. Curly mesquite is a perennial, warm, native, increaser, and fair grazing grass. Curly mesquite can first be identified by that it is a short sod grass type plant, very similar to like buffalo grass. The most distinguishing characteristic in identifying curly mesquite is its distinct seed head. The seed head looks similar to that of columns set on a center axiom, and they alternate sides, as is noted here below the pointer. As the seed head begins to mature, it becomes more dry and begins to fluff out more, as is noted in this sample. And as it continues to dry and mature and the seeds fall out, it leaves a crankshaft type seed head, or what I call a crankshaft type seed head. Looks like a real small crankshaft that you get out of a car where the stem goes back and forth. Another distinguishing characteristic is that it is spreads by runners that have nodes and inner nodes, and at each node, as you will notice right here, you will get some leaf growth followed by root growth, and then the plant will spread in this manner. The nodes are usually fairly long, 4 to 6 inches, and are slick and free of hair. At the bottom side of each node, you will find a small tuft of hair.
Curly mesquite, Hilaria berlangeri. Perennial, warm season, native, fair, increaser.
Here we have a grass called fall witchgrass. The most distinguishing characteristic about fall witchgrass is that one edge of the short leaf is wrinkled or crinkled or wavy, whatever way you want to describe it. And the other margin is very smooth. There's no waves, no wrinkles whatsoever. But on this side, you can see the wavy appearance, or wrinkled or crinkled or crimped, whatever you want to call it. Another characteristic, when it heads out, a pedicel is what supports a seed, and it has a very long pedicel, which most grasses do not have on the seed. But this one has a long pedicel with a little egg-like shaped single seed at the end of each one of those pedicels. Very open head.
Fall witchgrass, Leptoloma cognatum. Perennial, warm season, native, fair, increaser.
The next plant we have is hairy grama. Hairy grama is a perennial, warm, native, increaser, and fair. Hairy grama is a short to medium-sized plant that usually attains leaf size from 4 to 6 inches. Hairy grama can be easiest identified by its typical grama-type seed head. And the thing that distinguishes it from the other gramas is it produces a long, bare stem at the end of the seed head that resembles that of a stinger. This is a sample right here of a mature seed head that has already turned straw-colored and ripened. And right below it we have one that is green and not mature. But the stinger is still evident right here. Another way to identify hairy grama is that on the lower half of most of the leaves you will find some short hairs growing from the leaf edge, as you find in side oats grama, but the hairs are usually quite a bit smaller, and also you don't have the black pimple where the hair emerges from on the leaf edge as you do in side oats.
Hairy grama, Bodaloa hirsuta. Perennial, warm season, native, fair, increaser.
Here is a clump of hairy tridens. It's a plant that's short, usually grows 8 to 10 inches tall, hardly ever over 10 inches, according to the rainfall. It's perennial, warm season, native, invader, and poor. Now, it has some identifying characteristics that you can relate to, I think, real easy. The first thing, the leaves are crowded at the base. Has what I call a naked stem. If you'll notice, the stems on this plant are very naked. There's no leaves on them whatsoever. The leaves are all crowded at the base. And at the end of each naked stem is a cluster of seed that's compound and very fuzzy or very hairy. Now, the thing that really, if you had trouble, go ahead and look at the leaves down at the base of the plant. And on the margin of each leaf, it looks like it has been painted white. Each margin is white. And that will tell you for sure that it's hairy tridens.
Hairy tridens, Tridens pilosus. Perennial, warm season, native, poor, invader.
Here we have Indiangrass. I have both the old growth and the new growth coming. You can see the old growth heads. There's kind of a golden head with seed, a lot of awns on them. The way to really tell Indiangrass will distinguish it from all the rest of the plants. Where the leaf goes into the sheath, where they meet, you have a ligule. To me, I call it horns. Some people call them rabbit ears. I don't care what you call them. They will split, and hug the stem. Where the leaf and the sheath come together, the rabbit horns or rabbit ears and horns, which way you prefer, will hug the stem. And when you see that, that's the only plant that I know of that has a ligule that splits like that and hugs the stem. And that will be Indian grass. It is perennial, warm season, native, a decreaser, and good.
Indian grass, Sorghastrum nutans. Perennial, warm season, native, good, decreaser.
Here we have a Johnsongrass, which is a perennial plant, warm season, and it's introduced, and it's also an invader, but the grazing is good. Thing to look for in Johnsongrass, we have real wide leaves with a white midrib. I think you can see this white midrib on the leaf. And another characteristic, I think, when we see Johnsongrass, it'll usually get a bacterial blight on it. It turned purple. Here's a good example on the leaves. You can see it right here. It's got a purple tint to it. Even down here on the lower leaf, you might see some more here. But I think just to look for it, you just have to get out and look at it. Pull up some samples. It has some smooth rhizomes on it. I think that's the way to look at a lot of these grasses. You ought to go out and dig them up and inspect the roots and all. Of course, you can't see the roots now or in the contest, but still I think it'll help you. But wide leaves, white midrib, a purple bacterial blight on the leaves.
Johnsongrass, Sorghum halepense. Perennial, warm season, introduced, good, invader.
Here we have a cool season plant, little barley. Annual, cool season, and it's native, and it's an invader and poor. Now, if you ever have any trouble distinguishing between it and wild rye, just remember wild rye is a taller growing plant and the stems are straight. If you'll notice on little barley, look at the base of the plant. The stems come out crooked. They come up about an inch or so and they'll crook and then turn upward. Also, it's I call it a little squirrel tail seed head. It has little awns on it and they all point toward the sky. On wild rye, the awns will start to weep over or tend to bend over, and they're a lot longer. Also, little barley's seed head is usually enclosed in the top sheath of the plant.
Little barley, Hordeum pusillum. Annual, cool season, native, poor, invader.
Here we have little bluestem, which is perennial, warm season, native, a decreaser, and good. Now you're going to have to adjust your eyes and thinking to the time of year and color. Here it's kind of a light green color. In the other parts of the state, maybe a little later on in the years it matures, it gets kind of a blue-green color. But it'll always, the thing that I look at it is the base of the plant, to see how the sheaths are flat and they overlap each other. And it doesn't grow straight. It kind of wants to make a little curve. Flat, sheaths overlap each other, and a curve. And I think that's the best way for you to tell little bluestem. This is another specimen of little bluestem. You noticed a while ago we talked about the lighter green color, but this one is more of a blue-green color. I can't explain why, but just some of them will be a little more blue-green. But still, you won't have anything different about the bottom of the plant. The stems or sheaths are flat and they overlap each other. Just the color's a little bit different.
Little bluestem, Andropogon scoparius. Perennial, warm season, native, good, decreaser.
The next plant we have is perennial dropseed. Perennial dropseed is perennial, warm, native. It's an increaser, and it's fair grazing. There are two different perennial drop seeds. The one shown here is sometimes referred to as tall drop seed. In the national contest, this is tall drop seed. Tall drop seed or perennial drop seed can first be identified by the long, slender leaves. People confuse this plant many times with weeping lovegrass, but as you'll note, there is not nearly as much foliage in in this plant as there is in weeping lovegrass. Also, in perennial dropseed, you have foliage dropping to both sides, not mostly all to one side as in weeping lovegrass. The leaves and stems are basically slick and free of hair. The next item we look at in identifying perennial dropseed is the seed head. And if a seed head is present, this is the most important. As you'll notice here, this is a seed head from last year's growth, and it has lost most of the seeds. This plant usually does not seed until in the fall, and a new seed head has not come from this plant yet this year. As we look at this other seed head, you'll notice what I call a shuck. And this is a leaf that partially holds the seed head into it, and a lot of these seeds are retained inside of this shuck and not dropped until the next spring or late in the fall, late in the growing season. But as this plant matures, this leaf comes off of the side and sort of flags, and we call it a flag, and that's an indicator on how we identify this plant. This plant is the other variety of perennial dropseed, which is perennial, warm, native, increaser, fair. This one here is commonly known as meadow dropseed. Meadow dropseed varies from the tall dropseed in that it has a tendency to want to lay out from the center all around the perimeter. You still have your typical long, slender leaves that you have in your tall dropseed, but there's more of them, and they come from the center, and they want to lay out in all directions and kind of make a big circle. Meadow dropseed will also attain a seed head that stays in the shuck, as is in tall dropseed we discussed earlier. But sometimes your meadow dropseed seed head doesn't reach the same height and the length that you find in tall dropseed. Meadow dropseed can be confused with weeping lovegrass, but remember, weeping lovegrass, usually all these long leaves fall to one side.
Perennial dropseed. Sporobolus asper and varieties. Perennial, warm season, native, fair, increaser.
Here we have perennial threeawn. The reason they call it a threeawn, it has threeawns on each seed, hair-like projection on each seed. It's enclosed in this lemma and palea that we have here. The lemma is longer than the palea. And if you'll notice, the lemma is not quite twice as long, but it is longer than the palea. And on annual threeawn, the lemma and palea will be equal. And this is the way we're going to really be able to tell them apart, I think, if we just look at the lemma and palea on those seeds. A real fine plant, rolled leaves, almost thread-like. Of course, a lot of seed, a lot of awns. But the lemma, remember, is longer than the palea. I think if you'll look for that, where each seed is deposited, I think you'll be able to tell the difference. And also on annual threeawn, it's a more rigid plant and wider leaves than this one's more thread-like leaves than the annual, but this is perennial threeawn.
Perennial threeawn, Aristida species. Perennial, warm season, native, poor, invader.
The next plant we have is purple top. Purple top is perennial, warm, native, increaser, and it's fair grazing. Purple top can be easiest identified by its seed head. The seed head is an open panicle that has multiple or lovegrass type seeds. From a distance, the seed head looks like that of a Johnsongrass, but close inspection shows the many segments in each little seed. Purple top seed heads usually tend to be a dark maroon or purple color. This plant, however, can be identified without the seed head. The first identifying factor to use without the seed head is the node. The node tends to have a purplish ring, and as a plant becomes older and more mature, this node will turn darker and eventually almost black in the dried dormant state. Also, the second most identifying factor is the base of the plant, which is extremely flat. And I teach that it mirrors. You have one single round stalk coming from the center, and you have a opposite on each side that duplicates one another or mirrors one another. And the third distinguishing characteristic is touch. It has a distinct oily film or greasy film when you run your fingers over the leaves.
Purple top, Tridens flavus. Perennial, warm season, native, fair, increaser. To continue the evaluation of 17 additional grasses, you may wish to view Grass Identification 2.